Welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. The Invisible Wheelchair Podcast was selected by FeedSpot as one of the top 10 Obsessive Compulsive Disorder podcasts on the web. I'm Donald Grodoff, EFT tapping practitioner and OCD coach at FamilyOCD.com. On the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, I focus on the hidden world of OCD and anxiety with interviews and information around this topic. My purpose is to bring about awareness of OCD, those who treat OCD, and of course, those who suffer with OCD. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a treatable and manageable disorder. In my practice at FamilyOCD.com, I guide people through the process of ERP therapy and other alternative treatments. If you know of someone suffering with OCD, I can help. Simply visit FamilyOCD.com. If you or someone you know suffers or has suffered and recovered from OCD and would like to get their story out, simply contact us through www.invisiblewheelchair.com. We want to talk to you and get your story out on the podcast. Know that the ideas and thoughts presented here are not necessarily those of Family OCD, Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, or Donald Grodoff. We also ask you to take just a few moments and leave comments at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. Those comments help us to know what the next topic should be, and we really want to hear from you. Now, let's get to that podcast. Today I have the great pleasure of introducing Linda Culleton. Linda Culleton is an expert in obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety and has worked with high-profile clients both nationally and internationally. Linda's approach focuses on healing the root cause of the issue, not just the symptoms, as that is where life transformation takes place. She is a Kundalini yoga and meditation instructor and is passionate about empowering people with life skills and tools to live a healthy and happy life. Linda holds accreditations in counseling therapy. She is also a special needs yoga teacher and provides yoga and mindfulness to kids. Linda's unique program for obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety was featured on TV RTE2 documentary My Anxious Life with Vogue Williams. Linda will be offering deep, intensive retreats for people suffering with OCD, where she will be teaching the transformational tools to transform your life. So now, coming to you from Ireland, let's join that interview with Linda now. So Linda, thank you so much for being part of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast today. I'm really looking forward to this.
It's brilliant. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
And Linda, what I always ask of my guest is if they would be willing to give a little, maybe a personal story that helps my audience get a better feel of who you are. Would you be able to share that with us today?
Yeah, perfect. Sure. So I'm from County Ireland. I'm from Ireland, County Meath. And I'll talk a little bit about, I suppose, my own story with OCD. So, it can resonate with people that's listening. I would have been very anxious, I think, during, say, my 20s. I ended up kind of working in a job that really wasn't for me. I was in a very stressful job, but even I just wasn't in something that I enjoyed. I was working long hours. I was very much trying to, I suppose, fit into something that really wasn't for me. I was training to be an accountant. So with any kind of training and professional kind of role, there comes a lot of, long hours and training responsibilities. But I started becoming really anxious anyway about my work and is things good enough? Am I good enough? Et cetera, et cetera. And I'd spend a lot of time worrying about that. I suppose my way to deal with that at the time was we would have a big social life, and in a training firm you would have spent maybe Thursday nights going out and everyone would be letting off steam, and maybe you do the same on Friday or Saturday. I was taking these feelings, I could feel it even getting progressively worse at work, where if someone asked me something, I'd feel like I'd blush immediately. I feel like I would have a golf ball in my throat all the time, no matter, I'd be carrying bottles of water around me, and no matter what I'd do, it just wouldn't alleviate. I'd feel like a nausea in my stomach, that kind of sensation. So this was getting progressively worse, but I just put it down to the environment I was working in was a very high tense environment. So I just thought it was part of the process. I was studying at the weekends as well. I was working during the week. So you kind of mold into this kind of way of being, you know. And then I suppose I first had intrusive thought then in 2011, and it was around harm of a family member. And I've never experienced like an intrusive thought before. As we know, intrusive thoughts to that level, I know, you know, negative thoughts, everyone has them, but the intrusive thoughts very different. Very intrusive, meaning that's completely against your nature, but very frightening, very fearful. And that was the trigger to like really kind of turn my life upside down from that day, because while the anxiety was something that I had for a period of time, I kind of lived with that. And as we know, a lot of people can be suffering with anxiety and we just try and get by. But when you have an intrusive thought, it kind of, for me and my experience with clients, is that it completely turns your life upside down, because it's very hard to try and say I'll just be fine, because for me it became like, obviously it was like, what's going on? I felt like I was losing my mind. I never thought anything like this before. It was about a family member that I completely and utterly adored and loved. With that, they became obsessive. So anywhere I go, if I seen a knife in the kitchen, if I was constantly triggered. And it became so bad that it was really obsessive. My only relief at that time was sleep. I couldn't wait to get to bed, because I knew that I was so physically drained, mentally drained, the energy of just constantly being in your head trying to push this away, or what is this? Am I lose my mind? Having all these worse kind of scenarios of, will I end up being in the hospital, or, you know, having suicide ideation kind of mixed in with that, because of the thoughts were very, very frightening and fearful. Never had the thoughts of I wanted to commit suicide, but having the thoughts of just very in the mood, very, very low, very, very low mood. Started to become quite socially withdrawn. I would have been very, very sociable person, very sociable. And it came to a stage where I didn't really want to go anywhere. I didn't want to see anyone until I fixed this. This had to be fixed, and then I could try and be somewhat sociable. That completely changed my life, for sure, definitely. And still to this day, it has changed it. And looking back now, good way, but definitely then not so good, obviously. Then I can show you then what happened next was, I suppose I didn't tell anyone for a while, because when we have intrusive thoughts, or a person has intrusive thoughts, they're generally very fearful, and it's, you know, they can be embarrassed, shameful, feel like these kind of feelings of why I'm thinking this. So I didn't want to tell. Obviously I was thinking this about a family member. So the last thing I wanted to talk to was another family member about this, what would happen to me if I tell them. So I ended up going to the GP, and I was prescribed antidepressants at the time. I was very, very low. I was very low, but I had said to the doctor, but I am not depressed. You know, I wasn't depressed. Yes, my mood was completely low and very much just like really upset all the time about, why am I thinking this? What does it mean? Or do I want to do this? No, you don't want to do this. And the constant battle that we know between intrusive thoughts. So I didn't take the medication, because I said to the doctor, like, I'm not depressed. I know I feel depressed somewhat because of these thoughts, but I knew that if I could deal with the thoughts, that my mood would for sure lift. So I did get the tablets. This is my own personal experience, so this is not me saying what someone else should and shouldn't do around medication, but I did get the medication, and I brought it home with me, and I said, look, if things come, worst case comes worse, they're always there. It's like a security kind of psychological blanket there all the time, you know. So then I went to different kind of therapies that you do. I did console with a family member about what I was speaking or what I was thinking. They did obviously, you know, reassure me that it's a mental health issue and all that kind of thing that would come with it. That did give me some relief for sure. that did ease that kind of guilt when I did talk to somebody about, and someone that that could support, and kind of not saying they need to know how I feel or need to understand it, because it's very hard for someone to understand this when they don't really have lived it. It's like anything else, but that they knew it was a mental health issue. So from there, then I went to psychologists, and I started doing CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is probably the known, treatment for OCD with the medication or whatever. So I started CBT, and I found that helpful initially, because I was learning that the thoughts are creating the feelings, and we're triggered, and how to kind of challenge these thoughts by looking for your evidence for, evidence against, and really kind of training the brain to realize that there's actually no evidence for these specific thoughts that you're going to act out, and it helps to deal with the anxiety levels. So I did find that useful short term, but as a long term method for me personally, when I was having an intrusive thought, or when I was triggered around a specific issue, or triggered around the theme of the OCD, all that stuff around CBT would completely, it's like as if I never done it, because I was so focused on, how do I get rid of this? Is this true? My anxiety, the anxiety was so high that I couldn't cognitively even think clearly. So for me, I think, yes, it had definitely a point to play in therapy, but I think that when you're in that zone, it's so hard. You can't see clearly at all. I went to another therapist then, because I thought, well, it must be the therapist. And this is what I started doing. I started going to one, it's not fixed. Okay, it must be them. Going to another, and I went around multiple ones. I went to different healers, I went to different things. Then I ended up going to a class one day. It was Kundalini yoga meditation. My sister was going. I said, look, I'll go anyway. I went, and I came out, and I didn't feel like anything really had changed for sure, but I just felt like, God, I want to know more about this. I started doing classes weekly. OCD was very much there, but this was a whole healing journey that I was never on before. I decided to become a teacher for my own personal experience, because I knew there was a lot of stuff that was there, that needed to be healed. Then in the process of becoming a teacher, we do a lot of Kundalini yoga and meditation. It's very powerful, because we do a lot of work on the nervous system and on the mind, and basically really a lot about the nervous system. So at that time, then we were doing a lot of different things for depression, PTSD, anxiety, and a lot of different mental health issues that would be widely known. So I started looking at whether there's anything for OCD, and I came across a book. It was written by a guy called David Shanahan-Kalsa. He was a Kundalini yoga teacher. What he'd done was, these teachings are thousands of years old. He would have went to a class with, say, some of the gurus, you might call them, or the masters of this type of breath exercises. So Kundalini yoga doesn't just involve yoga. You're doing a lot of breath work. Breath work is really very important, because it rebalances the nervous system, or changes the nervous system, really balances the person. This guy, David Shanahan-Kalsa, he took some of these teachings from Kundalini yoga, and there was one specific technique. It's called OCD breath, and it was told to him that this was very effective for obsessive compulsive. He was told that it was very, very powerful to treat obsessive compulsive. So what he done was, he created a protocol for OCD, like a recipe, and you do X amount of exercises or specific breath work, breath techniques, that what they do is to fully balance the nervous system. So they're ultimately, if we think about the nervous system, everything is triggered at the nervous system point. It's where it all happens, is at the nervous system. So what this done was, I started practicing this. I started, obviously it takes, I start off with like maybe 5 minutes a day, and I built up to maybe half an hour, 45 minutes a day. Yeah, the rest is history, basically.
That's a really beautiful story. I mean, because the results that came out of it makes it a wonderful story. You've now turned this into a practice for yourself in helping others. Tell me a little bit more about what you do in your practice to help people with OCD.
Generally, when I have clients come to me, they would most likely have tried a lot of different treatments, or some not. Obviously, they're severely suffering. Most likely, the majority of them are suffering with, obviously, they're all intrusive thoughts. So what I would do is, I teach the client these specific techniques over a period of maybe 12 weeks. And that means that they're not starting off doing like a half an hour a day. They're starting off with 5 minutes a day, because you can understand if you're very, very anxious, the last thing you can maybe think about is even sitting down. Okay, it's not about and it's not about sitting still. It's not about focusing on your breath. It's not about listening to the sound of your breath. What we're doing is we're basically closing off our right nostril. We're inhaling through the left. We're suspending our breath. We're exhaling through the left nostril and suspending the breath out. So it's a bit technical. It's each of the breath segments have to be equal in length, so we have to time each of them. So it's a bit technical, but very easy to get used to once you start practicing. So it's not about sitting and listening to the breath. You're actually, in fact, your mind's going to be quite busy because you're focusing on all the different segments you have to do, the practice. My objective in anything is to empower somebody, empower you to know that you can heal yourself, empower you to know that the healing is inside, that we need the environment and we need the tools to make that happen, So I empower their client by teaching them the exact protocol. Then they go and they start practicing it straight away from day one, maybe at 5 minutes a day. And eventually, maybe after 2 months, they're up to a half an hour a day. But that's not a big deal because they've gradually brought it up for 5 minutes a week, say. The aim of the practice is that they don't have to do this. This is not a lifetime practice. It's not something that you have to do for the rest of your life. The aim of this practice is that from the Kundalini yoga tradition, again, it was stated that this specific breath technique, that if it was done for 90 days at the perfected rate of the breath is 15 seconds per breath. But it would take a person about 6 months to get to that perfected rate. And then you add on your 90 days. So you're talking about if someone was consistent doing this practice, 6 months till they got to that perfected rate, and that's doing it daily. And then 3 months, the 90 days at the perfected rate, was stated that it can eliminate all obsessive compulsive issues for a client. So that's my aim. The client wouldn't have to stay with me for 9 months. They do it for maybe 12 weeks, and then they go off and they know how to do it themselves, and they maybe just check in once a month, and that's it. And the key to this exercise is you don't wait till you have 9 months done before you see results, because I wouldn't do anything for 9 months if I didn't see some relief. I just wouldn't,
Yeah.
You will see relief very, very quick. Now, obviously, everyone's individual. But when you start doing this stuff, because you're working on the nervous system, everything starts to change, and it's subtle changes over time. And maybe a month into it, you're going to notice that, okay, I'm having intrusive thoughts, but I'm not really reacting as much. Or sometimes I'm really reacting like I normally did. So what it does ultimately is that when people come to me, they're like, I don't want their intrusive thoughts. That's natural. I don't want these. Okay, but it's not really the intrusive thoughts you don't want. I get that. It's actually the reaction to the intrusive thoughts. If we can change the reaction, we no longer have the intrusive thoughts. So we're not dealing with it from a symptom basis of an intrusive thought. We're dealing with it from the root of the basis, which is the reaction. So when we change, so what will happen with a client is over time, 2 months, 3 months, they'll start noticing that, okay, the thoughts are coming in and out, but I'm not having as much of a reaction. The anxiety starts coming down. And as the anxiety starts coming down, they're not as triggered as much. And the thoughts also start to alleviate, because as we know, the brain's only bringing these thoughts back because of the reaction, because it's fueled by the reaction, And that's basically how it works. Yeah. And I've had huge success with it, just not only in my own personal life, but with other people, because from my point of view, my experience is that because it's healing at the root and not a symptom level,
You talk, I know, and we talked a little bit before we got on the recording about the fact you believe that it's cured. I'd like to kind of address that as to cured versus like I think I've told you, is I've always believed in it being manageable, not so much curable. But now, based on what you just said, it kind of makes more sense. But talk a little bit more about the difference between what you see as curable versus what most people, I think even in the IOCD world, the foundation world, they talk about it's manageable, but it's not curable. So maybe you can address that a little bit more.
Exactly. Well, you see, for my own personal thing was that because when we think about, say, OCD, which is an anxiety issue, it's really from the nervous system. It's really from, and fear is coming from basically at a subconscious level. That's why as much as on a conscious level, when we try to change this, it doesn't be deep enough because it's a very rooted deep within the subconscious, which is also controls the nervous system. Okay, so if the subconscious controls the nervous system, therefore, when we do this breath technique, it balances the nervous system, which also then releases the fear, because the fear, they're both intricately connected, which is in the subconscious and the nervous system. So when I think of something to be managed, I think of like, in my opinion, it's like kind of, say we have a car. I know this is talking about a car, but we have the engine of a car, and then we have the lights. If we keep, say the car is showing signs of, it needs to be looked at, say, right? We're not running as well as it did, and we're constantly looking at the lights. The car will still show these kind of signs, always, always, always. So I relate to like the nervous system, like the engine of a car, that when we treat the nervous system, where is this, what's actually happening from the nervous system point of view? Why are we constantly being fired? In other words, firing these chemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, all these, that's keeping you in this high alert, highly sensitive area of fear. Therefore, it has to change, because the nervous system, we're designed to be in a state of balance. We came on this planet in a state of balance. Something happened throughout our lives that maybe put us a little bit off balance. So therefore, how do we go back to it? Was that, well, in my opinion, is that we work on the nervous system, and it can change, because fear is subconscious mind. We can't change patterns and programs that's in the subconscious mind as well. It's not just, okay, we're born with this, or in my opinion, we got this through different situations in life, so that's it. I think about empowering the person, knowing that there is another way, like there actually is another way when we deal with at the root.
Now, for yourself, I'm curious so you don't feel like you get any thoughts that are similar to what you had gotten when you were in the midst of it?
No, if I did have a thought like that, I have zero reaction. So I
Okay.
wouldn't really, unless I had, say, for example, so say like that window behind me. I know I'm sitting here, but to say there's a window behind me, and I first had an intrusive thought about the window. What if I jumped out the window, right? Which can be intrusive thought for people. And I do the practice and I start feeling better. I may also always have some sort of association, because that was when I had my first intrusive thought. But I never have a reaction to any of them, ever. Would I have an intrusive thought on a daily basis? Never, ever. It could be
They
something.
they would just be considered thoughts then, I
Yeah,
guess.
they'd be considered thoughts. It's only intrusive if it makes me feel, if I fear, if I have anxiety.
Okay.
That's,
Okay.
yeah. So I don't, like, I might have, I mean, who doesn't have a little bit of anxiety now and again when they're doing maybe a presentation or an interview, or, a general healthy form of anxiety, but never to the stage of where it was. Never anything like that. No.
Okay. That makes sense. So this breathing method is part of the Kundalini yoga?
Yeah. So it's like Kundalini yoga has like a multiple kind of, you might say they're called kriyas. They're specific techniques for specific issues. This breath technique was taught thousands of years ago, and it said it was effective for obsessive compulsive. So it's a technique out of the Kundalini yoga tradition. Yeah, it's a breath technique. It was stated that it was effective for obsessive compulsive, and it's been trialed by this guy David Shanahan of Culleton. It's completely changed my life, and it's what I use with clients, and it works, because I've seen it with clients as well. The only reason why it wouldn't work is that if you didn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
It's like, that's an
that
obvious one.
yeah, I was going to say that happens, all the time.
Yeah,
This.
exactly.
Um,
Unfortunately.
would you mind, without bringing up names or anything like that, just give us an example of a client that you've worked with and what?
Yeah, I suppose I've had a guy, he would have had OCD for probably 35 years, I think was around that. But during that time, he didn't have it. He said it wasn't all, it wasn't, he had a few years in between, which is that he didn't have it really bad. Do you know what I mean? So maybe he was going through, I noticed that as well. When clients or people are feeling good in themselves, so maybe they're doing their exercise, they're in a good mood, they'll feel like they're a bit stronger. They're able to deal with the thoughts a little bit better, yeah? But when other life stuff comes in, and maybe things are stressful, work stressful, relationship stress, they will notice that the intrusive thoughts, their reaction to the intrusive thoughts is much stronger, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, you probably noticed that as well with people. So anyway, this client, about 35 years, but as I said, in the mix of that, it wasn't all like a 35 years of OCD. There was definitely parts he said that he felt like he was fine. So he was on medication for depression, and he had gone to some therapy. I don't know if he talked much about the intrusive thoughts. I do find for people that don't really like to talk about what their intrusive thoughts are, it's definitely something they don't need to. But he didn't tell the doctor he actually really had OCD. He said he was feeling depressed, which he was from the thoughts. So anyway, he started the practice, and he was doing it for he started seeing relief, because if you didn't see relief in something, you wouldn't keep doing it. You wouldn't do something for half an hour a day, I think, if I didn't start seeing results in some form, shape. So start getting some relief. Done it for about 9 months. He doesn't do the practice any longer, and he tells me he's no symptoms whatsoever. He's no intrusive thoughts, or that's what he says. And other people have done it. He was very, very disciplined. What I'd say about him was he was so super disciplined, super disciplined. This man was 60, I don't know, roughly mid-60s, and he was super disciplined for someone that was like, you know, when you think of something that's alternative as well, you can be like, especially when you've looked or you've been researched for something so long, you can be like, well, this might be just another thing, you know. But he was super disciplined, and that's why he got such great results for himself. And no, he says to me, like, it's completely gone. He does a little bit of a meditation practice now anyway, because he realizes I suppose you might call it how precious our mind is, and it's like self-care, as our body is self-care, you know. But other than that, he doesn't do the specific OCD protocol. So
what you're saying, I run into. I'm an EFT practitioner, and run into the same kind of thing. It's the ones that really will do the practice, will do the work, that are conscious about it, you know, that are and determined, really get the best results out of it. So we could probably talk about this all day, because you sound very passionate about it, and I think that's wonderful. But what I want to do here is to let my audience know how best they might be able to find out more about you, get a hold of you. And I'll also remind them, I will put this stuff up on the Invisible Wheelchair podcast website, the invisibleWheelchair.com. But if you tell us, like, your website, whatever you feel is best to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I suppose the website's best. I do have a YouTube channel, it's Heal Within, but my website's probably the best, because sometimes you can find different things on YouTube, you know, for the same kind of name. So my website is www.heal, within, within.ie.
Okay, and like I said, I'll have that up on the web too. So, well, it's been a joy to talk to you, and hearing your story and hearing the results that you're getting is fantastic. And I think it is something that my audience will enjoy, getting that information and learning something different, and that's what this is. So, Linda, thank you so much for being part of this today.
Thank you so much, Don, and I really appreciate and grateful for taking the time out and spreading the message further afield. So thank you so much for having given me the opportunity.
This concludes this podcast. We really would appreciate your comments. Simply leave a comment at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. There, you're able to submit a comment that will help us determine future podcasts. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please email don@invisiblewheelchair.com. Remember, there is a corresponding tapping recording for each of the podcasts, with the exception of the interview podcast. You can find these tapping recordings and archive past podcasts at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. Finally, there is relief for OCD, and we at FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com can help you find that relief. Again, you can contact us through those sites, FamilyOCD.com or FocusedHealthyFamily.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at InvisibleWheel1, that's the number 1, or at Family OCD. So thank you for listening. Keep tapping and transcending your life to new heights.